Well, it won't be a surprise to you that I just want us to think a little bit about going into 2026. Those songs that we sang at the beginning of the service kind of preach themselves. And I don't want to take loads of time, but I do want to ask just how do we position ourselves as we look into a year that we will not be certain about. It's interesting, I read a lot of newspapers, and lots of the newspapers had things about this is what might happen this year, this is what could happen, this is what we hope will happen. And of course, everybody's left thinking, no one really knows. Because ultimately, we're not really that much in control. And in fact, I think we wouldn't, even if we did know exactly what this year will bring, I don't know that we'd be better off. Because what we do is we peer into a world that we're not sure how it's going to be. But as Christians, what we're doing is we're called to peer confidently. There was a verse that I was thinking about earlier, towards the end of last year, about from Corinthians, where Paul talks about we don't know yet, but we peer into a glass or we look into a mirror. Because at the moment, things are not exactly always clear, but there will be a day when they are clear. And let me read the passage, because it's a passage that I kind of want to anchor some thoughts together about. It's the passage you know really well, but let me read it. If I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, but I don't have love, I'm only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy, and I can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains, but don't have love, I'm nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor, and give over my body to hardship that I may boast, but don't have love, again, nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love doesn't envy, and it doesn't boast, and it's not proud. It doesn't dishonor others. It's not self-seeking. It's not easily angered, and it keeps no record of wrongs. Love doesn't delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects. It always trusts. It always hopes, and it always perseveres. Love never fails. But where there are prophecies, they will cease. And where there are tongues, they will be stilled. And where there's knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when completeness comes, what's in part disappears. When I was a child, I talked like a child, I thought like a child, and I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me. For now we see only a reflection, as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part. Then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. And now these three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. The Corinthian church was a fascinating place to be. If you're part of that church in Corinth at that time, it would have been exciting in some ways, but very fractious, very engaging. But it was a church that effectively was more like Corinth than it was like Jesus. That's the problem. And Paul writes to a church in a city that is competitive, that is successful, that is self-sufficient, that prizes wisdom above all. And he writes to a church and says, actually, what you need to be is sacrificial and Christ followers and interdependent, not self-sufficient, and truly wise. And Paul writes into a context where people around them in the culture wanted always to be in control of what's going to happen. And Paul writes to them and goes, we're called to a different way of being in the world around us. And this chapter falls into the midst of this. I don't know how you feel about the year ahead. It's easy to be anxious about the year ahead, isn't it? It's kind of like every time you put on the TV news, it's like, oh, wasn't expecting that. And what will happen next? And it might be that your own anxiety about your own life, your own health, your own situation. It's kind of like we've just done with Brian and Faith, you know. Brian tells us just a little bit about the story of the fragility of having a child. We live in the 21st century, technological age. We live next door to one of the best hospitals in the country. We live a couple of miles from massive maternity units in Manchester. And yet, there's a moment where you go, what's going to happen next? We feel like we want to be in control. But actually, sometimes we need to recognize that we're not. And the danger is that we sort of go into anxiety then about what's ahead. Now, some of us find that more prevalent than others. Some of us find ourselves in anxiety a lot, don't we? It's kind of like, for some of us, it's our default setting. Others, we manage a little bit differently, but there's lots of folks who, they live anxious lives. And when people are anxious, we tend to want to engage with control. This slide shouldn't be here, but I can make it work. I don't think you noticed. We'll edit it for the tape later. In Corinth, their anxiety as a church, and I think it was anxiety, meant that they were divided. And they were divided by lots of things. They were divided by heroes, divided by those who felt ripped off, divided by those who felt offended by sin, divided by those who'd sinned, divided by those who looked careless about faith. They were divided by those who looked frigid. They were divided by those who were anything. They were divided by those who were careful. They were divided by those who loved ecstatic worship. They were divided by those who were fearful. And they were divided by those who loved what Paul was saying, and they were divided by people who hated what Paul said. It's a great church to belong to. When anxiety comes, actually what happens is you start to fragment. And that's why we're called as a church, as the church, big C, we're called to be non-anxious. Because our anxiety will lead to division that actually is really unhelpful, because everybody then closes in on themselves. And it's exactly what happened in Corinth. So what does it look like when we face up to it? Well, you and I both know that sometimes we feel like what we want is to be able to control things. And that desire for control, that need to control things, comes either because of overconfidence, we think we can make things work, or because of fear. And interestingly, both of those attitudes to life can lead to a desire to control. So you may know how it feels to be the person in the room who goes, I know what should happen next. And if they don't do what you think should happen next, you don't go, well, maybe they're right. You ratchet it up. You go, I'm the one that's right. I can see clearly here. And the control becomes even more. Or, interestingly, when you're fearful about what's going to happen next, you try and exert control because of your fear. Does that make sense? It's either overconfidence or actually fear. And it's in that context, in a church, that Paul wrote to them. And I want to highlight two things this morning, very simple things, really. I think we are called, as we approach a new year, where there's lots of things we don't know, we are called to walk humbly. We're called to walk humbly. That bit I read before, we know in part. we prophesy in part. In a church where some people were going, no, we know exactly what God's saying. No, we prophesy in part. When completeness comes, what does he mean by that? The completeness is, in Paul's mind, is when Jesus returns, when all things are revealed. When completeness comes, what's in part disappears. Then he uses that image of when I was a child, I thought like a child, I talked like a child, etc. And then I became an adult and I put my childishness behind. And he's using that picture of what will it be at the moment? Well, at the moment, we're more like children than adults. But when Jesus comes back, we will be more like adults than children. Now, we see only a reflection as in a mirror. Or we see through the glass darkly, for those of you that remember the King James Version. It's like you can see, but it's kind of like not quite accurate. But there will be a day when we will see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall fully know, even as I am fully known. Paul had people around who were so confident that they knew everything. And Paul was reminding them, we live in between the times. We don't, there's almost like a humility of going, this is my best understanding. But I might be wrong. This is my best understanding. When your family say, tell me about faith. Why does it work out like this? This is my best understanding. This is what I understand about faith. There's lots of things I'm not really sure about, but this is what I do know. There's a humility about that. There's humility amongst us when we go, I see things slightly differently. I'm interested to know why you see it like that. Can you tell me? Can I listen? Rather than making everybody believe and act the same way. There's humility that goes, I see in part. One day I will know in full. Kind of wonder whether eternity will be a moment where we go, oh, now I get it. So when we are dealing with one another, whether it's preaching, in a house group, in conversation, there's a humility that's needed. Where we offer things to one another, but we weigh them together. There's humility in what we know. And then Paul says, there's a humility in our relationships. And he starts talking about love. It's the bit we read about Paul's definition of love. It's patient, it's kind. It doesn't envy, it doesn't boast, it's not proud. It doesn't dishonor others, it's not self-seeking. It's not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. It doesn't delight in evil, it rejoices with the truth. It protects, it trusts, it hopes, it perseveres. And when I was thinking about today, it dawned on me that I might want to pray that. And I wrote a prayer around it that goes like this. Lord, I want to be more patient and I want to be kinder. I want to stop envying others. I want to stop trying to manipulate others to think well of me. I want to stop putting others down. I want to stop being so self-centered. I want to stop being so easily upset. I want to stop being so unwilling to forgive. I want to stop gossiping about others. I want to be someone who always protects others, always trusts others, always has hope for others, always perseveres with others. I don't know if that resonates with you. I want to be that person, Lord. I want to be humble. I want to be humble. Last thought. I want to enter 2026 humbly, but I want to enter 2026 confidently. And the confidence comes from two things. The confidence will come because we can commit to one another. Because we can, as we act humbly with one another, then actually we become confident with one another. Confident that the people have got our back. Confident that they're praying for us. Confident that they're for us. Confident that they want the best for us. Confident that they'll protect us. Confident that they'll trust us. That's the church that's confident. But the confidence comes not just from our own ability. In another church that was divided in the New Testament, Paul wrote this: "In all my prayers for all of you, I always pray with joy because of your partnership in the gospel from the first day till now, being confident of this, that he who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus." It was not a perfect church in Philippi. It was a church where there was division. It was a church where people didn't always get on. It was a church where people were sometimes a bit difficult and awkward and complaining with one another. And Paul, at the beginning of his little letter, 4 chapters, just very short letter, he says, I'm confident of this, that God's begun something in you and he will complete it. You see, we're not the primary actors here. God is. So when we're dealing with one another, the really important thing is, can we help one another spot what God's doing? Not force other people to do what we think they should do. Can we actually just slow down with one another to ask the question, what do you think God's doing around here? Because God's at work, and what he's begun, he will complete. He'll complete it for you as an individual. And it may be that for some of you, the idea, like the break's been good. And some of you, tomorrow will be the first day back at work after a bit of a break. And some of you will be delighted to be there, and others of you, your heart will sink a little bit as 6 o'clock comes this evening. But God's at work in you, in that place. I'm confident of this, that what God's begun in you, he will complete. He's not going to let you go. He's not going to just let it all go for nothing. There's a confidence that comes from knowing that he's been at work and he is at work and he will be at work in you and in us. And how do I know that? Well, Paul, in another letter to another church, says this: who's going to condemn us? Christ Jesus died and he was raised. He's at the right hand of God and he intercedes for us. Most of us don't find prayer very easy. We don't think we're very good at it. I don't think we're very good at it as a church together, if I'm honest. We find it difficult, we find it awkward, and we get all of that. And there's no judgment, there's no criticism. It's just like, yeah, we find it difficult. But this is the truth. Jesus is praying for our church. He's a better prayer than I am. He's praying for me as an individual. He's praying for Neil. As a husband, as a father, as a grandfather, as a pastor, as a friend. He's praying for me. He's interceding for me permanently. So I can walk humbly into 2026, and I can walk confidently into 2026 because he's ahead of me here and he's upholding me. I mean, I know, in a sense, if I'm not careful, I'll just keep on banging on about this, and I'm pushing against an open door. But if you thought you could meet Jesus in the flesh and say to him, Jesus, would you pray for me? In our church, from time to time, quite regularly, we will invite, do you want prayer? If you knew that wherever it might be, at the back or the front, there was, with respect, there was Sarah, or there was Ian, and Anne, and Jumi, and Jesus. Now, with respect, folks, I've got a feeling I know where the long queue would be. It'd be like, it's okay, Anne, I'll wait. No offense, I'll wait. Why? Because I think I'd like Jesus to pray for me. Because I feel that, no offense, I think he gets it. You'd be in the queue as well, of course. Well, the good news is, he is. That 6 o'clock in the evening feeling when you know Monday morning's coming. He's interceding for you about that. That fear you have about your family, he's praying about that. That fear you have about your own health situation or finance situation, he's praying about that. And so we walk humbly and confidently into a future that none of us can be certain about.